Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heart of the Matter. I am your host, Elizabeth Vargas. It's wonderful to have you back. Recently, many of you probably read and saw the headlines on the U.S. Surgeon General's report on the youth mental health crisis going on in this country. He called it an urgent public health crisis that is going to require all hands on deck. Lots and lots of our kids, our teenagers, our young adults are suffering from anxiety and depression. Too many of them are self-medicating their way out of this crisis, which has led to an opioid overdose rate among teenagers that has tripled since the year 2000. It is a huge crisis, and a lot of people can't figure out what to do. In fact, we know from statistics that we know already in the general population that fewer than 20% get the treatment that they need, solid science-based treatment that they need to deal with their addiction disorder. But with kids and teenagers and young adults in particular, it's only 6%. Why do so few of them get the quality help they need? Well, today on our podcast, I'm going to talk to a woman who is doing her best to change all that. She is the principal of Northshore Recovery High School, Recovery High for short. There are 30 such high schools across the country, and she's trying to make sure that there are more of them. This is a high school that all the kids there are kids who are suffering with substance use disorder, and they were actually featured in a great MTV documentary called 16 and Recovering. I highly encourage you to watch it. Michelle Lipinski, who's the principal, has said, listen, substance use disorder remains the most stigmatized health condition in the world. She has warned that we're going to lose a generation if we continue to treat these kids like they're bad when actually they're only sick. She makes a good point. If we could have punished our way out of the addiction crisis, we would have done so a long time ago. And she's right. Our criminal justice system, our jails and prisons are full with people who suffer not only from mental health issues, but from substance use disorder. So today on the podcast, we're doing something very special. I'm going to have Michelle Lipinski, the principal of Northshore Recovery High School, on, along with 3 students. One of them currently a student there, 2 of them recent graduates, all talking very openly, very honestly, very candidly, and very powerfully about their battles with substance use disorder and how they're recovering one day at a time. Michelle Lipinski, welcome to Heart of the Matter, and welcome to Shaylee Dobbs, Alba Ward, and Rachel D. Domenico. It's so nice to have all of you with me. I've been wanting to do a show on recovery high schools for a very long time, and Northshore Recovery High School was the first one on the East Coast. Michelle, tell me how you got the idea to start this high school.
I was running an alternative school in a neighboring city, and a lot of the students were presenting with substance use issues, and I didn't know what to do. And so subsequently, my superintendent at the time, one of his children started tampering with some opiates. And this is a public story, so I'm not outing anybody. Mm-hmm. And so he and I tried to find a solution. And we worked with the local government. We worked with, it was actually Governor Romney and Lieutenant Governor Healy at the time, back in 2006, 2005, 2006. And they came up with this model. And so we worked with the legislation to open the first recovery high school.
How does this work? I mean, every kid at the school is in recovery, yes?
Every student at the school has a diagnosis of a substance use disorder. Mm-hmm. Yes. Recovery is such, it's a journey, not a destination, is what I say. So I think the word recovery sometimes can be kind of a target. And so it's like a working definition of recovery, but they're all moving towards becoming more of a self-directed adult and moving and transitioning through high school. And really, like I said, they identify what their own recovery looks like.
In most normal high schools, if a student comes to class and they're high or they're drunk, they get sent home. They're often suspended. How does it work differently at Recovery High School?
Well, hopefully they don't come to school under the influence. I mean, that's few and far between. But when they come to school, they have to do drug testing. And we work with restorative practices, and students don't feel, you can we talk about this a lot more than I can. Students don't have the shame and the stigma. So if they did have a rough night the night before and they come in and they're presenting in a way that, is, looks like they may have used the night before. They come in and they talk to us and they tell us that they're struggling. And if they do come in under the influence, we have them assessed by the nurse. And if they can go back to class, they go back to class. And, obviously they're searched, and we try to keep things as safe as possible. Like I said, there's no like one size fits all. So it depends, like if they had a little bit of alcohol in the morning, if they had a lot of alcohol. We have breathalyzers. And so we really just work with the student and their family and see whether it can be classroom ready. And if they're not classroom ready, we get them to a place where they can be.
And Shaylee, Alba, and Rachel, all of you have either been students and graduated from Northshore Recovery High School or are a student. Tell me how it works from your perspective.
It's really comforting. Whenever I would use and stuff, I would feel guilty. But when I would come to the school, I didn't feel like crap because I wasn't getting like put down. I wasn't getting shitted on. And so I actually talked a lot. It was actually really easy for me to talk about what was going on with me. And that's most of the students here, really.
Alba, we saw you were featured in that fantastic documentary, 16 and Recovering, a 4-part series on MTV that basically profiled the school, the students there. Michelle, you were featured prominently in it. And first of all, you were so honest, Alba, in this documentary about what you were struggling with, about the fact that you really helped a lot of people. I'm just telling you, I salute you and your courage. But you were very honest and open about the fact that from the time you were 12, you were really struggling. Tell me about that. What was that like?
I've had depression for a very long time. When I think back, like I think I've had it when I was like really young, like in elementary school and stuff, but it hasn't like gotten worse until I reached middle school because everybody going through puberty and everybody trying to find what they're going to be and everything like that. And I had no idea. I was kind of winging it, and some kids didn't understand me winging it. So I got pretty bullied.
But you started using drugs and alcohol pretty young to help get through those awful times.
Yes, I did. I started off by smoking weed. I had a family member who was like, "Oh, you should try this. It's super cool." And so I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to try it because you're cool." So I tried it. And then, I fell in love with it because it kind of felt like it helped my anxiety and stuff. And it kept my mind off of like the bad, like trauma and everything like that. So it helped in the meantime. And then people started realizing that I was starting smoking, and I'd be called like a crackhead and stuff like that. And it kind of like gotten worse. So I was like, "Oh, you guys think I'm a crackhead? Then I'll be a crackhead." Like that's what my mind was like.
Shaylee, what about you? What can you tell me about your story?
Mine's a little different. I grew up in a household that was very active in the AA community. I was raised in AA. I had a single mother who got sober when I was 2 years old. So I knew better, but I started hanging out with older people. I started smoking weed and drinking when I was 14. And then I started dating a drug dealer, and that's when things got really bad. Within like a 3-month period, I became an everyday opiate user, Coke every day and Xanax. Around that point, so I started Northshore Recovery High when I was 16 in 2016, and I'm still currently a student. I was really bad when I was here. I was always going to the nurse to make sure I was okay, getting sent home, sneaking off to get high and stuff. And it took me 4 years to finally have something click. My parents tried to do everything that they could. They understood it, being addicts and alcoholics themselves, that there wasn't really much they could do. Michelle did literally everything she could have, section after section after section, me leaving rehabs, treatment centers. And then I turned 18 when they started filming. I seen the camera crew and I left. That was 4 years ago. And I never came back. About 11 months ago, I went to treatment, took it seriously, came off of meth, fentanyl, and Coke, and have been clean, and it's all because of Michelle, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
I can't.
Michelle, what is that like hearing that?
And it's hard for me to, I didn't do the hard work for her. She did the hard work, and we plant seeds. And, my staff and I all love these children like they're our very own. And I think and that's the reason that they came back. So when Shaylee came back to me in the spring and she said, I'm sober and I really need to finish my diploma. Can you help me sign up for the GED? And she just kind of fell apart in my office. And she's like, I forgot what it feels like to be here. I want to come back to school. And I was like, kind of 21, so one of those, but look at her. Look at what I get. I look at these beautiful people. So so I don't take credit for that, but we keep a place where honestly, we love them and it's radical compassion. We don't ever give up on them, no matter how old they are.
Shaylee, what was the difference when you came back? And you're sober now and clean and...
Yeah, there's really no difference with the school. It was just all me. I wasn't ready to get clean. I had all the same opportunities to get clean. I just wasn't ready. And now that I was ready, Michelle took me back with open arms. And this, to this day, is still like my safe place. Like I can call any of the staff, no matter what time it is, and say, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. And they help me.
Anytime, no matter what. Wow. Okay, Rachel, how about you?
So I graduated from Recovery High School in 2014. And I just want to say, what year? It's 2022. That is the same. I know if I'm struggling or if there was something going on, I still reach out. I call Michelle all the time. So I grew up in a dysfunctional home. The first time, I always said I was never going to do drugs because I have two older siblings who, used opiates really. When I was really, really young, I watched that. So my bright idea was to drink alcohol because that's not a drug, is what I thought. So the first time I ever drank, I was 11 in the sixth grade. By the time I ended up at Recovery High, I was, I still said I was never going to do opiates, mind you, but I was, using everything else. Anything you can think of that wasn't an opiate, I was using. And then... I don't know, that was 2011. But my disease really took off my senior year of high school. When I turned 18, I started using opiates. And that was it. I never put them down. Yeah.
We hear that story over and over again about opiates, that it's a whole different ball game and just terrible in terms of being caught in its grip. I'm curious from the three of you ladies, explain the difference between a regular high school and how you were treated in your struggles, in your difficult times, and Northshore Recovery High School. What the differences are. You've all talked about the fact that you can talk to anybody there, that you continue to talk to everybody there. But let us know how that works exactly and what the difference is and what a difference it made in your lives.
I noticed I went to Beverly High School and Marblehead High School, and none of the staff was educated on what addiction looks like in a child. So it was just clueless. If I smelled like weed, they would know. But if I was nodding out in my English class, they would just think I was up all night. And they didn't have the tools, and I don't blame them, but they just don't know what they don't know.
Michelle, how important is that the teachers and the counselors and the principal, that they understand what addiction looks like, what substance use disorder looks like, what using looks like?
Thank you for that. That's become my life's work, Elizabeth, is to help people understand how to help these children in their schools. Because I don't think every district can open a recovery high school. I don't think this is necessarily the answer. I think the answer is exactly in what you just said. It's about training people who are with our children all day long, how to do this in a way that's compassionate and empathetic, and to work with them and to not keep suspending them or put them in prison. And so I think that for me, it's kind of become all of our life's work to let people know, which is hence, the documentary. But my staff here have had extensive training on how to work with adolescents who, have trauma and who, have other mental health disorders, and how to work with them. And I wish that people can model their schools on this. So when you see someone who's struggling, really treat them with dignity, because they're struggling.
You said in a TED Talk that you gave that if we treat them with kindness and compassion, if we get them help, they heal.
They do.
We do.
But it's tough love too. I think I've sectioned every single one of.
What does that mean when you guys have all talked about
it's called a Section 35. It's an involuntary, they take, so you can talk about it, Rachel.
Okay, so the first time Michelle had me sectioned was out of juvenile court. I think I was 17. I called her, and this is how much we trust the staff at Recovery High, because I was like, they're making me take a drug test, my probation officer. They're making me take a drug test. I'm going to fail for everything. Please don't tell anyone. You can't tell my mom. And she was like, okay, yep. And 20 minutes later, I was in front of a judge stating that I called Michelle and I didn't sound right in the conversation. And I was on my way to a involuntary commitment, which is at the time it was the Castle in Brockton.
Yeah, Castle.
That was my spot. It was it's 30 days that you're inpatient treatment.
So it's against their will. So if students aren't willing to go to treatment, there is and here in Massachusetts, we have something called a Section 35. So we can have them involuntary committed. And it has to be in front of a judge. It's humiliating. It's horrifying. It is absolutely the last thing you want to do. So before we pull a Section 35, which can only be done by, police or a parent or a close family member, before we do that, we give them every single opportunity to do it voluntarily. But if it gets to that point, they all know that I'll go to court with their parents, and they never want to see me at court. But, we can have those conversations. I mean,
right.
Even though she graduated many years ago, her mother and I still, have conversations about how's Rachel doing? She went, so I think it's just having, if you create that space and if you could do it in a place that doesn't move, like an academic institution, then they will come back when they're good. They'll come back when they're not so good, when they need support. And I just think that that's what we're lacking in our communities, is a place where people can trust that no matter what, they're going to get 365 fresh starts, that they can come back.
And I'm just curious, Michelle, your staff, your teachers, how many of them are in recovery? How do they all know how this works, what it looks like, what to do?
I have my art teacher right in front of me if you'd like to ask her. Get over here, Devin. So Devin started here. You can come over here. She didn't know she wanted to work here. She happened to be dating one of my friends, Debbie, and she's really a great artist. And so I met her, and I happened to be looking for an art teacher. And
I don't know if you wanted me here, but here I am.
And Devin, she was only 6 months sober. So
yeah, I really didn't know what the school was about. I just needed a job. And I said, who is going to hire an alcoholic graphic designer? Michelle's like, I need an alcoholic graphic designer. And I was like, I'm in. And so I learned as I went, you know what I mean? Recovery High helped me get sober as much as, we've helped the kids. So, and I learned so much from Michelle. I just asked her questions all the time. What's the best way to help these guys, because it was I don't know, as much as it was hard for me I couldn't imagine how, as hard as it was for me to get sober as an adult, these guys have not, as much stuff that I have going on for myself. That didn't make sense, but you know what I'm saying? It's harder for them, I feel.
No, I totally hear what you're saying, because I know that I'm in recovery too. And a lot of times in meetings that I go to, because by the way, recovery is a group process. Right. I think isolation is the single worst thing for a person who's struggling with either a mental health issue or a substance use disorder. But I'm always really amazed and in awe of the people who have found recovery so early on in life.
Right.
That's especially because, they've got their, how do I graduate high school sober? How do I go to college sober? How do I get married sober? How do I, Rachel and Shaylee and Alba, I'm curious to hear what you think about that. I mean, facing a life of recovery from the time that you're a teenager.
Most of my teenage years which is I'm so upset about, is I have a hard time remembering because almost my whole teenage year I was using. So there's only bits and parts that I remember. Yeah.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah, probably
for sure.
Best,
just so you know. It was terrifying.
Yeah. And it's just, it feels so good being on the other side. It really does. I don't feel so paranoid all the time, and I don't feel guilty. I used to always feel like such an awful person because my Nana, she would always say, if you love me, you'll stop. And that's what a lot of people say for your loved one. And it's like, I can't. It's what I have to do. I can't do it for my Nana, you know? And that would break my heart. It would hurt me so much because I couldn't give her what she wanted. And so now being on the other side, it feels so good. She trusts me more. She can talk to me with anything. I talk to her about anything. And I feel more grown up, you know?
Yeah, that's really, and you just said something so important. You can't get sober for anybody else. You have to get sober and clean for yourself.
Right. And you know what? You can have help. Like sometimes, like if you have a friend that helps you on the track of staying sober, then that's good. But it's like also you who has to do it. Like for me, how I started getting sober was that I had somebody who would help me start off. So I was staying sober for them at first. And then eventually I've felt strong enough to do it for myself.
I'm curious, the three of you, do you think that you would have gotten clean and sober if you hadn't gone to Recovery High School?
No, absolutely not.
Really?
I mean, maybe eventually, but so that people always look at me like I'm crazy. I just have, I have no filter when it comes to like my use. Like I would walk in here if I relapse and I'm like, yeah, I did coke last night. And that's just like the culture here, I feel like. And that carried, I didn't have that at my previous school, but that carried with me like no filter. I am incapable of lying when I use. But as a teenager, complete abstinence I struggled with that. I had 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. Like I couldn't grasp being sober for the rest of my life. But I think that's a huge part of like why I am okay and sober, because I knew that like it didn't have to be complete abstinence. Like I had to drink on my 21st birthday. I didn't, but I thought I did. And that not being like looking at it like, oh my God, I relapsed. I haven't used opiates in 2 years. Like, should I have drank? No, but I didn't have to throw everything away. And I think sometimes people look at recovery like you have to be completely abstinent and you have to do it this way. Like that's not always, if I was looking at it like that way and I didn't have Recovery High, I probably would have just thrown it all away.
So how important was it to have classmates and teachers, like your art teacher we just heard from, or Michelle, but also other people in your classes going through the exact same struggle that you're going through? People you can come in every day and you can say, last night I drank, or last night I slipped and did, such and such.
It's really hard to see. I have 4 years on most of the students here, even 5 or 6 years. And I see them doing the same exact thing that I was doing at their age. And you want to coddle them and tell them that it's going to be okay, but that's enabling. So I just give them the best advice I can and tell them I know exactly what they're going through and I'm here if they need anything, but that's an adventure they have to go on alone.
What about you, Alba? Did it really help knowing that you were among other people sort of walking the same path you were?
I think if I never had that chance to actually feel connected with somebody, I think I would have committed suicide because I felt so alone. And right when I stepped foot into this school, Michelle came with open arms. She said, hello, how are you? I hope you're feeling good today, right when I walked in. And that's when I knew that I could trust everybody in this building.
Wow, that's really something. You really think it would have been that dire for you if you hadn't had that community?
I think so. I felt so alone, like so alone. And when I came here, I felt like I could be myself. Like I could finally do what I felt was right and normal in my eyes.
Michelle, I'm really struck by the fact that in watching this documentary and watching your TED Talk, the enormous amount of compassion that these kids get in the hallways of Recovery High School. If I could count how many hugs I saw in that documentary series, I don't think I could.
I got in some trouble with that, just,
Did you really?
Oh yeah, educators don't like hugging. I mean, I'm not saying in general. I think this is just we're just a little bit different, and we use the we love our students, and we tell them that.
I think that's what really connects everybody in the school is the hugging. I think like we need like the human contact, Yeah.
Well, I think there's a good touch. Like you have to be taught that there's something called a good touch, right? And so we're not doing it in a sketchy way. And I think my staff and I know boundaries really well that if a student does it, because some kids don't get hugged at all, at home. And so sometimes just walking down the hall and just, how you doing? Just that connection is really, really important.
Well, and having compassion for the mental health struggles that we know from, all the current research, the entire world is suffering right now. Anxiety and depression are off the charts as a result of the pandemic. They were already rising. We know the influence of social media, especially on young women, like the three of you girls or ladies, excuse me, is incredibly destructive. And I was struck by something, Alba, that you said in the documentary, which was that, mental health issues and substance use go together like cheese and crackers.
Yeah. It's so true.
But it's so
true.
Exactly. I mean, we get back to the same thing. Somebody who is trying to numb themselves is feeling pain of some kind.
Mm. And sometimes even when they do the drug afterwards, they feel the pain. Yeah. So it goes both ways, really.
Yeah. What about Shaylee and Rachel? What about the two of you? Tell me what you struggled with. And I know Alba has been very honest about really debilitating depression that she suffered. What about you guys?
I was just a very anxious and emotional child. And when I was 14, I went through a pretty traumatic trauma.
What happened?
Nope.
Okay.
You can say it.
Okay. But it was an awful thing and you had a tough time with it.
Yep.
And did you turn to substances to help relieve that pain?
Yeah, I was already smoking and drinking, but after that happened, that's when I started using hard drugs.
Right. And Michelle, therein lies the dilemma that a lot of society looks at these kids and says, say you're trouble, go off to rehab or go off to some sort of boarding school that is, meant to get you, scare you straight. When actually what a lot of these kids need is a hug and some compassion and understanding.
And yeah, I mean, I think that I call it, there's the year without a Santa Claus and there's this land of broken toys, but they're all a part of each other, right? And nobody knows that they're broken. There's nothing that a child can say to me, a student can say to me that shocks me. Because they come with these stories, these stories that Shaylee's speaking of are more common but they don't talk about them in traditional high schools. And here, Shaylee can open her mouth and say that story to any of the girls here or any of the boys, and everyone's going to go, me too. Like it's one of those places that you just don't feel broken. You actually feel like, okay, I'm in a safe place and we can start to kind of build ourselves back together. And it just feels a lot less lonely. And like I said, I am honored to be able to work with these young people because it's great seeing them get to that other side where they can actually help others. And that's the beautiful part of this recovery, whether it's abstinence-based or harm reduction. I even hate using those words because I don't want people to die on those hills. But it's just recovery, whatever you want to call it. Because I know these three right here, like they're recovery coaches. They help other people. Like I watch them. Their sole mission is to help other people find the joy and beauty of recovery, whatever pathway they want to choose. And that's why every day I can walk in here and watch what these three women are doing. And it renews me.
Rachel, you, after graduating from Recovery High School, you are now a recovery advisor after going to college, yes?
Yeah. So I actually just left that job, but I do work. I'm actually in a LADAC program, which is like a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. Hopefully get onto like a social work degree and a LADAC. But yes, that is what I was doing for the last, 7 months.
That's great. So you're all paying it forward.
Yep.
Yeah, the best we can.
I work at the school now.
Do you really? Oh my gosh, Alba, you really are.
I just kept coming and I was like, oh my God, I can just work here. So.
No, when I asked her if she wanted to be a para, she was like, of course. And then afterwards I go, okay, so we're going to pay you this much an hour. She goes, oh, I get paid to come here? And I was like, yeah, Alba.
Michelle, tell me in what ways is the Recovery High School exactly like another high school? I mean, obviously kids come to school, they're expected to go to class and do their homework. How is it like other high schools around the country?
Yeah, they still have to pass their classes. And when we have standards-based curriculum, so they have to pass MCAS, which is their high-stakes test in order for them to get their diplomas. They have to go to classes. They have to, my teachers teach a little bit differently. I think that they all understand where the students are, so they differentiate curriculum like they read about. But, they're incredibly talented, but they get them the information that they need in order to get those credits to matriculate. So like I said, we're just smaller classes, but we're still classes, and they still sit here and get the work done. And, they all have a schedule for 7 periods of the day. And
a lot of the teachers here also have a special education training. So that also helps a lot.
How does that help?
So some students need I'm one of the students. We need to be taught like a certain way. Mm-hmm. And they work for they help each student the way that they need to be helped. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they recognize that different kids learn differently and are flexible about teaching in ways that they can reach them.
Right.
And then I think at every opportunity throughout the curriculum, if it does come up, a lot of my staff are in recovery, and they have their own experiences if they don't have family experiences. And so they're also, if there comes a time where recovery becomes the most important thing to do in that day, that kind of takes over. So there is kind of a line where it's not always like we're teaching recovery 24/7, but my staff know enough that if it becomes a topic of conversation, that it becomes the topic of conversation, even for a brief period of time until we can get back to teaching history or English or math or whatever that is. So,
and you do drug tests at the school randomly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she does.
Okay, ladies, are those nerve-wracking?
Not anymore. Now that you're going to pass a drug test, no. Yeah. But before, I would have other students take my drug tests for me. Mm-hmm. I would pay students to take my drug tests for me.
Not me. I never cared. I would light up a cup and just proceed on to class.
We used to put water in the cups. The students would do anything. We used to put water in the cup and
they would know, by the way.
They would know. Yeah. They always knew, but they'd like to see how creative we were trying to be.
Yeah.
So what happened, Michelle, if somebody tested positive on one of those random drug tests? What happens next?
So it depends. It depends on what the drug is. It depends on whether or not that person.
I would be taking trips down to Beverly Hospital every day. Yeah.
Why, and tell me why that happens. Because the first thing that happens after a positive hit on a drug test is you go in to see a counselor.
I would go see Michelle, and then we'd take a trip down to the nurse, and I would get evaluated, and then the nurse would say, yep, Shaylee needs to go down to Beverly Hospital because she is not safe. So I'd spend some time at Beverly Hospital until I sobered up a little bit. At this point, I think I was 18, so I would just walk out and come back to school and do it all over again the next day and take another drug test and be back down at the hospital.
All the students, most of the students think that when they take a drug test that they're going to get in trouble, like with their parents or in general, and that's not what happens. If you pop up for opiates, then you definitely it has to be talked with your parents, definitely. But if it's something else and they're really struggling with it, we talk to them about it and we see what else we can do for their recovery plan.
Okay.
So every student has a recovery plan, and on that recovery plan, they identify if they're going to be using other substances. So that's going to be abstinence-based, or if they're going to use medical marijuana or whatever that is. And they're really honest about that. So we have that conversation with the parents or the guardians, whoever they're living with. And so when they do test positive, we, just have a conversation and make sure that the parent knows and then go back to class.
I'm curious, how much of a role did peer pressure play in helping you guys get or stay sober? Did you ever feel like, or was it the opposite? Was it just complete like, okay, if you tested positive, no biggie? Like, I'm just curious, in a community of other kids and teachers in recovery, what role that played for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt that push from some of my peers who, like, I mean, it's like one big family here. So, you definitely feel when like other people are kind of pushing you to, do the right thing. So I don't know if it necessarily helped, but you definitely feel it. It makes you think rather than isolating it.
Mm-hmm. Alba, Shaylee?
At first, in it's probably 2016 to 2017, the students then, including myself, we really didn't care. And then we started losing a large population of the students. So then that's when we started checking up on each other and trying to help each other take steps to move into the right direction.
It scared you.
Yeah. It scared all of us. We had 6 students die that year.
Of overdoses?
Yeah. Yeah. And then more came after I dropped out that same year.
I mean, that's the scary thing about all of this. Well, this is a really deadly disease. It kills people.
Yeah. I can't even count anymore how many friends and family members I've lost.
Nope.
I mean, it's like past 10 fingers.
Yeah, and it becomes normal.
It does. It does. And that's like a sad thing to say.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly sad thing to say, but borne out by the numbers, we know that the number of overdose deaths since the year 2000 have tripled among teenagers. Michelle, why do you think we're losing this battle?
Oh, golly, that's a whole other. I can go on for an entire hour and a half about that, Elizabeth. I think that, and especially with the pandemic has only heightened that even further. I think it's just the lack of connection and the fact that we think that we can suspend our way out of this, that we really feel like punitive policies are going to change behavior. And we still have those antiquated punitive policies. Like they start at the district and they go right up to the school board and to city council, and we still follow these antiquated policies, and we can police our way out of it. Like, we can't. We've got to figure out how to connect with people at a cellular level and get them the help that they need. And we need to provide the help, and we need to have insurance companies that actually pay for the freaking help. So it's just, there's so many barriers to getting sober and getting into recovery. And especially a lot of the students that I work with, they fall under the poverty line. They get free and reduced lunch. And so their access to recovery is subpar at best. And so I just kind of feel like the disparity between, the insurance that you have and the kind of recovery support you get is I know that when I have to section a student, they're going to go to a certain place. Like, I take that very seriously, because I know that they're not going to have access to, the Betty Fords and the Hazeldens of this world. And I know where they're going. And I know that it's going to be a different kind of recovery. And it's not going to be worse. It's not going to be, it's just going to be, the system's broken, Elizabeth. I mean, I think you've probably heard that a million times over. I've heard a few of your podcasts. And it's just, for adolescents, the system is really broken. When we take an adult system and we shove it down to what an adolescent needs, instead of giving them summer camp, like, they need summer camp. They need to know how to have fun and be sober. They need to know how to read a book and be sober. They need to know how to go to class and be sober. It's a different model, and we haven't built it yet.
I was struck in the documentary, you had prom. You guys
love prom.
They still come to prom. They graduate and they still come to prom. Yes.
That's hilarious. But why was that so important, ladies? I mean, to have the normal prom that every other kid gets in every other high school, you guys got to have.
It was good. We felt like we were also part of a regular school as well, being able to go to prom and stuff. So that was really good. And it's fun. All of us get to come together. We go on a boat and we all dance and listen to music and eat food. And we don't have to talk about anything else. We just talk about dancing, music, and having fun.
All in your gorgeous prom dresses.
Yes.
Dressing up was fun too. I wanted to read you guys something that I had read by a quote from a professor of psychiatry at Yale about the disease of addiction. He said, quote, "Imagine if cancer not only killed people, but in the process of killing people, it made everyone around them angry at them and ruined all the relationships with their loved ones. addiction not only kills people, but they often die alone after having ruined all their relationships in the process. I think his point being that, going to what you just said, Michelle, the way we as a nation, as a society, look at addiction, the way as a culture we punish addiction, the way we stigmatize people with mental health or challenges or substance use disorder. It shames people into silence, and it tragically prevents them from getting the kind of help they need. I just wanted all of you to weigh in on that with your thoughts.
So yeah, I feel like that's part of the problem with, that you're labeled as a troublemaker when it's really, especially as an adolescent, when it's really that you don't know how to deal with feelings and trauma and you're using substances to combat that. And now you're a troublemaker and a loser and whatever else. Why would you want to continue to be honest with people who already don't understand you from the beginning? And that I could go on for days, but that ties into more too. Like, if you don't have supportive people around you and you're using, and I'm not telling you I'm using, and you don't know anything or any education, like, how are you going to know to come check on me or to bring the Narcan? Like, and I think that's part of the reason, like, we see more and more people die as the stigma gets worse, even though it's supposed to be getting better. I don't know. That's it for me.
Well said, Rachel. Shaylee?
She said it perfectly.
Alba?
Some people, like, when they think that when they did something bad, they think that they're going to be that way forever, really. And like, just getting judged all the time just makes you feel like shit, man.
Yeah.
One of the students that we lost, who was in the documentary, Sean, he wasn't supposed to be in the criminal justice system. Like, we were trying to section him. And when the police came to his house to section him, which they took him out of bed, he said, "I'm going to have a cigarette." And they said, "No, you aren't." And he was wearing a house coat. He reached in his house coat pocket to get a cigarette, and they tasered him. And so he got violent. And so he picked up a charge because we were trying to get him better. He picked up a charge. And this became his segue into this horrible spiraling depression because he had to get a negative drug test in order to not go to jail now. And just the thought of even putting that, I'm like, I don't understand the expectation of why, people have to be, the sobriety shouldn't be on the plan when violence was the problem. So I just think there's unrealistic expectations across the board. And as soon as you enter into that system, getting out of it is like, we all know so many people in the system because they can't get a negative drug test.
What is the one thing, Alba, Shaylee, and Rachel, the one thing you would like others out there to know about depression, anxiety, addiction that you think society might not know? What's the one thing you would like them to know?
That's kind of tough to answer.
Yeah.
I like them to know that they're not alone.
Other people suffering, that they're not alone?
Yeah. It takes time.
Addiction doesn't discriminate either. It doesn't matter where you come from, your background, your origin, how much you have, how little you have. Doesn't matter.
True. Rachel?
That's really tough for me to answer. I just wish that more people would do like some research or some, read up on research or like evidence-based practices rather than, continue to like formulate opinions based off of what they're seeing or what they're hearing. Because those are the kind of opinions that, that it somehow turns into like a statement and then that's science and it's not. That the opinion people formulate in their brain about whatever it is, substance use disorder or, mental health, then that's, and they get stuck on that. And then that's in turn how you treat people. So I wish more people would like really try to see like where this is coming from. Why are we in like an epidemic? Why are so many people dying? I just want to know why people aren't asking like, why is this happening? Rather than.
But don't you wish that you can inject people with what it feels like to be in the most horrible depths?
Yeah, so they can actually
and so you can say like, now you don't use. Like, I wish I could make them feel how it feels to crave so deeply that you would give away your children.
Right.
Like, I need people to know that this is not a choice. Like, I wish that you can feel how hard it is to get sober when all you want to do is drink, or how hard it is to like not want to pick up a needle when that's the only thing that makes you feel better. Like, if people knew how hard that was, they would go, oh my gosh, we need to put everything we have to this disease. Like, this is what it feels like. Holy hell. Like, nobody should feel like that. And I just feel like people have the luxury of not knowing how that feels. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel that. Like, you have to become a soldier in that war. Like, you cannot unfeel that. So I kind of wish, like, right? Like, those people who are judgy, you can be like, oh, by the way,
Literally.
just see what happens and be like, okay, you get that for 24 hours. Let's see where you are. I'll check in with you tomorrow at 5. Bye. Like, and just, I think that would solve it.
I wish people had more empathy. Like, we're human. We make mistakes. Like, you should know that. You make mistakes too, Yeah. Keep an open mind, really.
But I think it also gets back to, Alba, what you were saying at the beginning, that your grandma, your Nana, as you call her, was, well, don't you love me enough to stop? And that's what Michelle was just saying. It's not a choice, is it?
Right. It's not.
It's a disease. And it's not, that doesn't mean you don't adore her or love her. It just means that you can't, that it's really, really hard once you are in the grips of that disease.
It's like you're getting swallowed whole, really. And you're like trying to get out of the hole. And you're just getting sucked in.
Right. And finally, it gets back to the whole, Michelle, you were talking about the fact that recovery is a journey, not a destination. I think that's the one thing I'm still struck by, the fact that anybody I know who isn't in recovery themselves they all think, oh, well, you're sober now. Oh, ta-da, you're done. The end, and it's not like that.
You know what, I was talking about this the other day. I've been sober for 1 year and 4 months now.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And a month ago, I was just driving around and I suddenly got the urge to do Molly. And I was like, I'm sober. Why would I feel that way? I thought I was done. Like, I thought I wouldn't get cravings anymore. But now I realize that being sober is still every day, it's still a battle. I thought that once you get sober, that feeling just went away. You didn't have to feel that way anymore, but it comes up once in a while. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's an ongoing battle. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully, Michelle, we can encourage other high schools around the country to get staff members. I mean, is that what you would like to see? How would you're not advocating that there be more recovery high schools. You're advocating that all the other high schools currently open and operating, the millions of them in our country, be more humane and holistic.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your goal?
Look at the discipline policies that we enforce, and how does that perpetuate the disease of addiction, especially for our athletes, especially for people in our high schools, especially for people who are identified. I mean, I stopped eating in the teachers' lounge. Like, there was a place where the teachers gather and eat together, because I just got so sick of hearing the stories about so-and-so and, well, his big brother, but like, it's like they just keep perpetuating these negative stereotypes. When I saw these beautiful children, like, I love the kids in the back of my classroom. Like, that was me. And so I just feel like we allow people to say these negative stories, and it just perpetuates the stereotype, instead of saying like, hey, stop it. Because I, as a new teacher, I wasn't able to say that. But I would hope that we wouldn't tolerate that behavior anymore in our high schools, of listening to people put children down.
And by the way, that can set that child on a path that they may never, get off. Because, a child identified by teachers talking in the teacher's lounge as a troublemaker, or the star athlete who is hungover or tests positive for drugs and gets kicked off the team and then suspended from school, and then parents freak out and send them to, boot camp for, survival boot camp, and then a therapeutic boarding. All of a sudden you're identified as troubled and difficult and the wrong kid to hang out with. And that's for that to happen to somebody when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, that can like turn that path dramatically for the rest of their lives.
So, I mean, I think, and I've done a lot of research and, and there's a lot of, I just wish that we can go into schools and say, here's the 5 things you can do. And it's easy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to give them any money. I don't have to give them any tools. It literally is just a mindset. Like, we need to change the mindset of how we work with people. It's not about throwing money at this. It's about having leaders in our community that say, I'm not tolerating this behavior anymore. We're going to look at the school board policies about students who come to school under the influence, and we're going to help them. Like, we're going to make a concentrated effort to change the system. That's why I'm a city councilor, because I'm not listening to them anymore. So you got to be a part of the solution. You got to put people in power who want to change schools.
Michelle Lipinski, thank you for your passion and incredible work in this amazing school. And oh my gosh, Shaylee Dobbs, Alba Ward, Rachel DiDomenico, you guys are rock stars, paying it forward. So congratulations, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, really lovely to meet you both, all 3 of you.
And thank you for being a power of example.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.
Yeah,
as
thanks
well.
for having us.
Thank you so much for listening today to Heart of the Matter. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website at drugfree.org/podcast. And as a reminder, if you need help with a loved one who is struggling with substance use, you can text 55753 or visit drugfree.org. We'll talk to you soon.